Welcome to the 6th episode of the Ancient Egyptian History series. We will talk about two families whose religious orientations were towards the sanctification of the sun god, and they built about 15 pyramids. They are not really giant pyramids, and they are not comparable in construction to the pyramids of Giza. On the contrary, most of them are collapsed or closed and the rest are not in the best condition, but there are about 8 pyramids. It is considered the gateway through which we entered the ideas and religious beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. It appeared on its walls. And the pyramids. They are texts in hieroglyphic script engraved on the walls and columns of burial chambers. Its importance is due to it being the oldest examples of funerary texts in ancient Egypt. And it certainly did not come out all at once or form in one era, so it dates back to older eras. 759 charms are found in 5 pyramids of kings and 3 pyramids of queens. If this is your first time hearing from me, it tells the story of a desert dweller who told the queen that he would take over the throne of Egypt. 3 brother kings will be sons of the same sun god. At that time, King Khufu was upset, but the priest reassured him. This talk did not happen in the era of his son or his grandchildren, but would happen in later eras. We can call it a kind of political propaganda for kings. They fabricated a story that they are descendants of goddesses in order to control the government in the name of religion. The prophecy was actually fulfilled and the 5 dynasties began with the king, and Usserkav was the first king to build a temple for the sun god Ra. This does not mean that it was the beginning of the worship of Ra, but rather the beginning of building temples in his name. Between Usserkav and the sun temples, Busir, the capital of the Fifth Dynasty. Temples open to the sky, as a re-architecture of sun worship. He built his pyramid complex in the northeast of Tyre, the Zoser group. His pyramid was called the Scribbled Pyramid because of its external shape. Its original height is 49 meters, and the length of each side is 73 meters. It was built of limestone blocks, and the remains of its white stone exterior were squeezed out. The pyramid and Sire are part of a large funerary complex that includes a ritual pyramid funerary temple, a place for offerings, a separate pyramid, and a funerary temple for his wife. The mortuary temple of the Kaf family, the cult pyramid, and the Queen's pyramid are now a pile of rubble, and it is difficult to identify them. But the complex as a whole differs markedly from what is known from the Fourth Dynasty, both in its architecture and in the place itself. Its changes are profound in the thinking of the rulers of the Fourth and Fifth Dynasties. In the Egyptian Museum is kept the head of the statue of King Usserkav, wearing the red crown, made of black peacock. Berti Turin said he only ruled for 7 years. He took over the kingship, right? And he ruled after the death of Usserkav. Opinions differed. Was he his son, or his brother? Ruler of Sahara according to the Palermo stone 14 years? But Burdett of Turin mentioned 12 years, and Manetho mentioned 13 years, but it is clear that it is a period of time. True, and he was one of the warrior kings of Egypt. There are carvings of the king with the white crown on a plate striking the Asians. And an attempt to secure Egypt's borders from the northeast. Military activity also appeared on the inscriptions of his temple. Princes of the western desert tribes and their families appeared in submission to the king, and pictures of the king's armies confiscating their livestock, Egypt's commercial connections expanded. A number of large sea vessels appeared, loaded with men, animals and their products, from Nokia and Palestine. Also, the Benrim stone mentioned the hermit, and a shepherd who campaigned towards the end of his reign to the land of Bond, and returned laden with fragrant scents, gold, and ebony, and depicted all of this on his temple in Abu Sir. The first work he did was to build the Great Temple at Abusir, a model temple of the 5 dynasty kings. The temple is portable and has a hall on 2 palm-shaped pillars. He was interested in decorating with landscapes and engravings, and from them we learned about the activity of the interior and exterior shepherd. He was interested in quarries, including the jellystone quarries in Tari and the diorite quarries in Bo Simbel. As for the pyramid, its original height is 47 meters. The length of each side is 79 meters. Its pyramidal style is like layers. That is, the pyramid's interior is made of small limestone, followed by 5 or 6 layers of unhewn stone that decrease in size the further away we get from the clubs. The steps were then covered with sand and gravel, and then an external cladding was made of good quality limestone. In contrast to the construction of the pyramid, greater attention was paid to the construction of the Valley Temple, the Funerary Temple and the Temple of the Sun. Different materials were used, limestone and granite were used, and great attention was paid to the engravings and landscapes in particular. King Neferkir-Kur was the 3rd king of the 5 dynasties. He took power after the death of Ser Ra. Most opinions say that he was his brother, and he was the last king mentioned on the Palermo stone, which gave him a reign of 10 years. However, historians Matthew McNutt mentioned 20 years, which they insisted indicates that he was more concerned with domestic affairs than foreign affairs. He mentioned the Palermo stone and offered gifts and donations to the deities, especially the sacred tetrarchs. He offered sacrifices to the shepherds of Hathor and took great care of the temples of the deities. He issued decrees to the governors of the provinces to preserve the rights of the temples. It seems that he was loved by the men of his court, and this appeared in the inscriptions of the tomb of one of his men, Raor, who is an example of good treatment. The pyramid in Abu Sir is the largest of the pyramids. Their original height is about 70 meters, and the length of the side of its base is 105 meters. I adopted the same method of the desert pyramid, the layered method. Some parts of his pyramid were not completed, and some parts were completed in later eras. After him, Shabaskara ruled. Some opinions say that he ruled for 7 years, while other opinions say that he ruled for a few months, and this is based on some archaeological texts. Because the pyramid is not complete, and there are studies. I remember that there was a dispute between him and Neferkir-Kara, because he thought that he was the son of Sahu Rai and more deserving of rule than him. King Neferufer, the 5th king of the 5 dynasties, took power after the death of King Shepsker. Information about him is almost non-existent except for the ruins of an unfinished pyramid and a statue of him sitting on his throne. King Nyu ruled after him for 30 years. He built his pyramid with the pyramid, so he became pious and devout, and he hated it and became discerning. Its original height is 52 meters, built of stone, and its roof is made of gypsum. He built a sun temple in the northern part of Saqqara, and its walls were filled with inscriptions that spoke of his wars in Syria and the western borders. His temple is also engraved with the oldest drawing of the celebration of the Feast of the Sit, which is the celebration held by the king to mark the 30th anniversary of his rule. After him, King Menk-en-Horus took over the rule, according to the Turin Papyrus, and ruled for 8 years. He left Abu Sur and moved to Saqqara and built a pyramid there. But he also built a sun temple in Abu Sur, and after him King Djetikar ruled for 32 years. There are opinions based on the tax records that he collected in his funerary temple, and they say that he ruled for 42 years. The Pyramid of Saqqara was called the Shawaf Pyramid. He carried out a number of campaigns against Nubia. But his reign was the beginning of the autonomy of the regions, and the beginning of the weakness of the central government. The last king of the Fifth Dynasty, and the most famous of them all, is King Unis, or Anas, because the walls of his pyramid contained the pyramid texts. Texts that help the deceased avoid the difficulties he faces in the afterlife. During his reign, the souls of the priests of Ra decreased and the influence of O0 increased. King Unis did not leave a male heir to the throne, and thus the rule passed to King Teti through the marriage of one of King Unis' daughters. Most researchers agree that King Teti gained his legitimacy to rule after his marriage to Princess Ipet, daughter of King Unis, and that he was loyal to him. He completed some of his constructions before he died. He cared for his god and his priests at the expense of the priests of Ra. He established his royal tomb in Saqqara, and among the most important tombs dating back to his reign are the tomb of the Vizier Morika, which contains important scenes and texts, as well as the Vizier Ankh Mawar. My pyramid is about 52 meters high, and its importance is due to the pyramid texts on its inner walls. This was the second pyramid after the UNESCO pyramid, which contains the dead pyramids. The historian Manetho indicates that King Teti was killed by his guards, and some opinions say that he was killed as a result of a dispute between the priests of Ra and the priests of Beta. The Abydos list is the only list that mentions King Vaser Kara Khatani of the Upper Dynasty. He was probably dropped from the other lists because of the short duration of his rule. Why is there no clear architectural activity? Perhaps he was a usurper of the throne. But the period of stability and prosperity in the history of the Sixth Dynasty was during the reign of King Bibi I. What we had, O star, were the priests of the sun whom we defeated, and it was still there. Besides loans, the deity of those whose influence was on the rise, starting from the Sixth Dynasty. He built the Pyramid of Saqqara and its walls had pyramid texts on them. He built a number of temples in many places such as Abydos, Dendera and Awasir, which contain a number of well-crafted statues. From the autobiography of Geshu's commander, Weni, recorded on the walls of his tomb at Abydos, we know that King Bibi I sent expeditions to discipline the rebels in the south. We also know about a conspiracy that took place in the royal palace to overthrow the king, and one of his wives was involved in the conspiracy. We also know from Wini's texts that the king married into one of the powerful Upper Egyptian families when he realized the increasing influence of the provincial governors. And his successor on the throne was King Mari, whom we see. Sources indicate that he joined his father in ruling, and followed his approach in heading south and protecting the borders. But he gave greater powers to the provincial governors. He lived on the unfinished pyramid south of Saqqara, and most of the events of his era. We know him from the tomb of Khufu, who conducted 4 exploratory campaigns under the command of King Mary Naharan. Behind the king is full, if he sees in the rule of the country King Bibi II who took over the rule, and he is still a child. According to the Turin Papyrus, he ruled for 90 years. Milton stated that he ruled for 94 years, which is the longest reign in the history of ancient Egypt. The long period led to the weakness of the central government and the increase in the influence of the provincial governors. The texts indicate that he made a commercial trip to the country of Band, and some punitive campaigns to the south. He was a contemporary of the pyramids of Saqqara and also found 3 pyramids for his wives. They succeeded to the rule. Ibn Mary Ra'i II ruled for a short period of about a year, as mentioned by the Turin municipality, to conclude the Sixth Dynasty with the queen. Neith, who was surrounded by a number of legends, was said to have taken revenge for the killing of her brother, who was supposed to take over the rule, and that she committed suicide after that. At its end, the Sixth Dynasty ended, and with it the Old Kingdom.